Welcome to the First Unitarian Society of Milwaukee's online worship service. I'm Reverend Jennifer Nordstrom, and I'm honored to serve as the First Unitarian Society of Milwaukee's senior minister. We welcome people of all genders, sexualities, ages, races, ethnicities, histories, and bodies. We welcome your mind, your heart, and your spirit. We welcome all you're bringing with you today and all your heart longs to set down. We'd like to pay a special welcome to guests who are joining us today. If you're visiting for the first time or joining us from afar, why don't you say hello in the chat now and tell us where you're joining us from? I welcome everyone into our worship service by inviting you to repeat our first church mission after me. We gather to nurture the spirit, engage the mind, and inspire action. Let's go now to our beloved sanctuary to light the chalice, which is the symbol of Unitarian Universalism.
Hi, my name is Angie Krieger, and I've been a member of First Church since 2016. My husband Eric and I began looking for a community around that time as the world was feeling less and less predictable. We were looking for a community that was multi-generational, that backed up words with actions, and maybe most importantly, a community that didn't give you a side eye if you walked in a little disheveled on Sunday mornings, because let's be real, Sundays are hard, even for us grown-ups. And we were thrilled when we found that at First Church. Our Sundays became richer. We enjoyed getting to know people at coffee hour and sitting behind the same couple most Sundays. There were just two problems. First, how did we talk about First Church? Having been raised in a religious household, I took a hard and vocal pivot from organized religion in my 20s. And so how to explain our joining a different church community to our friends and family took some thought, and we got used to answering a lot of different questions. For example, what are services like? To which I would often respond, well, it's like a TED Talk, but with music. Or questions about what our ministers are like, to which I would often respond, well, they're part philosophers, part poet, with some strong AOC activist vibes. But there was one other problem. How did I talk about pledging? How did I think about pledging? I remembered pledging from my church youth, but then it was called tithing. And it always had this layer of judgment and guilt associated with it. Like there was someone watching who would know if you weren't paying your fair share. Now, I know all of us come to First Church with different beliefs. And for me, I don't believe that there's a God or that the universe is watching what I do that closely. So why do I pledge? Now, I know better than to tell First Church members what to do. Y'all need to make up your own minds, preferably with a lot of facts. But what I can do is tell you what I did and what my family did. We took a look at all of the things that we spend on a monthly basis, and we look at all the things that we subscribe to. And like good millennials, we subscribe to a lot of things. We have subscriptions to not one or two, but 3 streaming services, an audiobook subscription, a yoga subscription, and at one time we even boasted a wine subscription. And we looked at all of those things, and unequivocally, First Church meant more to us than all of those things combined by much, much more. And then we came up with a number that made sense for us, that acknowledged and honored the support that we both give and receive through this community. Now, times are dark for many of us, but we know that Sundays will always be able to hear an uplifting message from one of our warrior poet ministers, hear a personal story from one of our fellow members that may bring us to tears, and enjoy laughter over coffee at the end of it all. Times may be pretty dark right now, but I like to think of First Church as my subscription to hope.
From the light of days remembered burns a beacon bright and clear, guiding hands and hearts and spirits into faith set free from fear. When the fire of commitment sets our mind and soul ablaze, when our hunger and our passion meet to call us on our way, when we live with deep assurance of the flame that burns within, then our promise finds fulfillment and our future can begin. From the stories of our living rings a song both brave and free, calling pilgrims still to witness to the life of liberty. When the fire of commitment sets our mind and soul ablaze, when our hunger and our passion need to call us on our way, when we live with deep assurance of the flame that burns within, then our promise finds fulfillment and our future can begin. From the dreams of youthful vision comes a new prophetic voice, which demands a deeper justice built by our courageous choice. When the fire of commitment sets our mind and soul ablaze, when our hunger and our passion need to call us on our way, when we live with deep assurance of the flame that burns within, then our promise finds fulfillment and our future can begin.
I'm sorry to share with you the news of the death of one of our members. Katie Phillips died very peacefully at Ascension Columbia St. Mary's Hospital on Monday, March 21st, 2022, with her family by her side. Katie had chronic leukemic lymphoma that had recently advanced. She was 86 years old and had been a member of our congregation since 2012. Plans for a memorial service at First Church will be forthcoming. As is our custom in this congregation, whenever we have a birth, an adoption, or a death among our members, we light our candle of life. Today, in honor of Katie Phillips.
Good morning. My name is Ann Hefter, and I'm happy to be your worship associate this morning. 2 UU principles have guided my life personally and in my calling as an occupational therapist. The first principle, the inherent worth and dignity of every person, and the second principle, justice, equity, and compassion in human relations. I have worked in healthcare in Milwaukee for the last 19 years. The patient population that I serve are some of the poorest in our city. Many of my patients are homeless, dealing with incarcerated loved ones, family members killed by gun violence, and the trauma of living in poverty. A large percentage of my patients are addicted to drugs and alcohol. Needless to say, I'm used to a challenging workday. In COVID, my days became even more challenging and intense. Work life in the hospital transitioned to a wartime triage style of management, where we would work when and where we were needed. Lunch breaks became a daily meeting for updates on the newest COVID-related need-to-knows for hospital life. As spring turned into summer, the PPE seemed even harder to tolerate by the day. Going into a patient's room, we would don a surgical cap, an N95 mask, an isolation gown that was coated with plastic, goggles, a face shield, and then finally gloves. Upon leaving each room, I was drenched in sweat and would shiver from the cool hallway. I would cycle through the day like this, only to return home in the evening feeling mentally, physically, and emotionally exhausted. I would lie in bed so tired, but unable to sleep. I would listen to music or podcasts or church sermons to help quiet all my worries and help me fall asleep. My inherent worth and dignity were not being honored. It was hard to be so depleted, but it was not the most difficult part. The most difficult part was working with patients who were so isolated and alone as visitors were not allowed. Many of them were in their late 90s or over 100 years old. Being isolated in this way can cause delirium in the hospital. As their caregivers, the patients needed so much from us. I gave them the therapy that I planned for them, but I also took time with them to visit and to listen to them. I would hold their hands and hug them despite being told to limit contact. I would make sure their needs were met and their rooms were clean before leaving. I tried to leave them knowing that they were loved. I treated them like family in place of their own families who could not be with them, and I tried so hard to live our second principle and give them compassion in the way that I related to them. I had conflicting feelings early on during the pandemic. Before we had vaccines available, I would say, I personally feel blessed that I can work and get paid while so many folks are out of work. I did not feel like the hero that the billboards and banners depicted. From a logical standpoint, I felt like I was just doing my job. I felt so many things during this time. Guilty that I would get my son and my mother sick. I felt alone. I felt tired. And then I felt guilty that I felt alone and tired because so many people were suffering. I was also unsure how to process the huge loss of life at work. I was saddened by how COVID affected Milwaukee in what seemed to me such an unjust way. I could see the disparities in the hospital I work at as COVID affected groups of folks in waves. First, we saw a surge of Black patients with COVID, and then homeless patients. And then the Burmese, Lao, and Hmong communities, followed by the Latinx community, and then again by younger caregivers of Black patients. I remain frustrated and angry by the old broken parts of our healthcare system that failed our community in the past during this pandemic and are reactive rather than preventative. The people who are struggling that come to the hospital I work at continue to need the basic necessities like food and housing and advocacy and literacy in their healthcare. They continue to medicate themselves with drugs and alcohol, and the system as a whole continues to put Band-Aids on these issues, where transitional housing, rehabilitation, and real solutions are needed most. I will continue to give compassion and dignity when working with my patients because I can achieve this one-on-one throughout my workdays, but I struggle with knowing where the justice and equity in our healthcare is in our city and our country. As I begin my 3rd year as a caregiver during the pandemic, this is one of the many things I have been struggling with. I am burnt out and I am tired. I'm distracted and even cynical at times. I recently took stock of what has been going wrong, and I realized that I stopped doing all the things that feed my soul. As I have struggled witnessing injustice and inequity in our healthcare system, I also have been struggling to live as if my own life has inherent worth and dignity. I stopped meditating and practicing piano, reading, and even participating in church. I have realized that my own experience of burnout has been linked with the outcomes of my patients. They continue to return to the hospital with the same health-related social issues. I thought I was making a difference, that my own care for them would help them to improve. But I am not enough. Each of my teammates are not enough in this struggle. This burnout has systemic implications. I am feeling burnt out because I was trying to shoulder the system's failings, but I cannot do it alone. We need one another and the community to begin to meet the needs of the poorest among us. I will take a step back for now to attend to my soul so that I can continue to do the work that I love. By honoring my own worth and dignity, I will be able to keep honoring others in the long journey of caring for people while also changing a system. Thank you.
Today is our congregation's Stewardship Celebration Sunday, the Sunday where we celebrate being a congregation and a community, and the final day of our annual pledge drive. Last week, our worship associates, those folks who tell a story every week in worship, explored together the concept of celebrating blessings, which will be the congregation's theme in June. As we do each month, we asked ourselves what the theme means to us as individuals, as a community, and in the world. What does it mean to celebrate blessings? Why do we do it? What needs to be celebrated right now? I asked the questions, and then I looked around expectantly for ideas from our deep and wise and often bubbling over with ideas worship associates. And you could hear the whisper of crickets in the room. Everyone just sat there looking at me, or studiously avoiding looking at me. Finally, one of our worship associates said, "Jennifer, I think that sound of crickets you're hearing is because it's hard to feel celebratory right now." Yes, of course it is. For so many reasons, it's hard to feel celebratory right now. From burnout to the push for productivity to grief to the anxiety machine in which we live, who has the time or the energy for celebration? During World War II, a lot of couples decided to get married fairly quickly and seize joy in a painful time. One woman who married during that time said that her relationship acted like an anesthetic against the difficult, painful times. Another couple named Ida and Cecil Nixon also decided to grab the happiness that they could in that difficult time. On their wedding night, Ida had to work the fire watch with her father. The schedule was already set, and Cecil was only home for a few days. So Ida went to work, and then that night she got married, and she spent 2 glorious, joyful nights with her new husband in the Catherine Wheel Hotel for their honeymoon. They banked that joy, and it pulled them through the war. Feeling like we don't have time or energy for joy, for celebration, for the things that we used to love is a sign of burnout. I see burnout everywhere. I see it in church. I see it among my colleagues, in my personal circles, all over society. I've had 5 congregants tell me in the last week that they're burnt out or overwhelmed. We are living in a collective burnout factory, having been through 2 years of prolonged stress inside of systems that were already requiring too much. Our bodies are designed to process acute stress with fight or flight or freeze responses that help us survive. But we have to have downtime from acute stress. We have to have time for our bodies to feel safe, to discharge and recharge in order to return to regular functioning. The threat of the pandemic and its parallel and related stresses has not let up over the past 2 years. Our bodies have been negotiating a consistent and significant threat level. Burnout causes exhaustion on multiple levels. It causes it on the mental, physical, and emotional levels. It includes feelings of detachment and helplessness. It's literally the opposite of celebration. But burnout isn't something you can just push through, or get over. It's caused by physiological reactions in the body, and it requires attention and intention to the body-mind connection in order to turn around. I want to be very clear with you. If you or someone you love is feeling burnt out right now, it's not your fault. You are not to blame for the intersecting stresses on your body or for the systemic failures that have led us into this soul-crushing and painful experience we're in. You've been acted upon by circumstances beyond your control, and I am so sure that you have done your best. Being exhausted and overwhelmed and at capacity or beyond capacity is okay. I mean, it's more than okay. It's normal. It's a normal human reaction to these circumstances. Now that we are here in these circumstances, though, it is necessary for you to care for yourself, for us to care for ourselves and for each other. In this massive state of burnout, we need to attend to the physical and spiritual and mental and emotional consequences of the circumstances. We need to tend to our souls. This is not optional. This is not a luxury. It's essential. Our bodies will stop us if we don't do it. And the sooner we do it, the less serious the symptoms and interventions will be. The longer we wait, the more drastic the signals our bodies will send, and the more drastic the remedies will need to be. Throughout this pandemic period, I keep reminding us that we need to speak to the body in body language in order to process the prolonged stress of this time. As I've told you before, in their book, Burnout and Completing the Stress Cycle, Doctors Emily and Amelia Nagoski say that if we don't complete our body's natural stress response, then the stress chemicals get stuck. They get stuck in our bodies and they make us sick and exhausted, and sometimes even shut down to the experience of life. We have to help our bodies understand that they are out of danger in order to release those stress chemicals. The Nagoskis say that there are seven different ways we can communicate with our bodies: movement, breathing, human connection, laughing, safe physical affection, crying, and creating. Now, I keep saying this, and understanding a concept is great. So I keep repeating it because we have to know it first. But knowing it and 25 cents will get us a gumball. Relief and transformation comes through practicing it rather than knowing it. So let's just take a moment right now and practice one of the 7 ways to talk to the body. Let's practice breathing together. Your breath is one of your most powerful tools for speaking to your body and telling it that it is safe. So right now, either close your eyes or just let them rest with a gentle focus at something in front of you that's still. And bring your attention to your breath. Where do you feel it moving? Where does it stop when you breathe in? Just watch it for a moment. Now, see if you can breathe in just 1 inch deeper than where you breathed in a moment ago. How long are your exhales right now? Watch your next breath and count the exhale. Now see if you can extend your exhale for 1 more count. The deeper your breath and the longer and slower your exhale is, the more your body trusts it's not in danger. We return to practice. Our first Unitarian Universalist principle states that we covenant to affirm and promote the inherent worth and dignity of every human being. This big idea is one that requires practice as well. We might understand it and agree to it, but when we do understand it, we need to recognize that every human being includes us. So often our church members apply our first principle to other people, to family or neighbors, even to people that we're angry with. But right now, I want to remind you that you are a human being, and your life has inherent worth and dignity. The inherent worth and dignity of every human being, it applies to you. If you burn out, if you are already burnt out, your own worth isn't being honored. If you're completely burnt out, you won't be able to tend to others if that's your priority, but you will have also failed to practice this principle as it applies to you and your humanity. Sharon Salzberg, who's a Buddhist and an author and the co-founder of Insight Meditation Society, writes, "To offer our hearts in faith means recognizing that our hearts are worth something, that we ourselves in our deepest and truest nature are of value." When we practice our Unitarian Universalist faith, we recognize that we ourselves are of value. Though we must not dominate the interdependent web of all existence, neither should we disappear. To honor the inherent worth and dignity of every human being means that we must not annihilate our own existence through overwork or resource depletion. No individual is responsible for doing it all. Pre-pandemic systems already exported labor onto individuals at an unmanageable rate. And then we added this heap of prolonged stress on top of it, using up our surge capacities and draining us of resources. Doing it all by ourselves is not possible. I tried to do it all in this service. I had planned a sermon about our Unitarian Universalist principles, those values that we covenant to affirm and promote as a community. I was planning to write a sermon about all of them, and stewardship, and the process underway to update our principles for the 21st century, which of course is a national and complicated process that our faith engages in every 15 years. I was planning all that and to celebrate singing and to connect with Anne's worship associate story and I was digging in to this sermon and I got lost and overwhelmed. I phoned a friend and said, help, I'm in a morass of words and I can't find my way out. My friend and colleague gave me the wise counsel that I can't preach to you about not doing it all and then try to do it all myself. Then she told me a story about her mom, who's a Unitarian Universalist lay leader, who heard a sermon 30 years ago and has been sharing the wisdom she found in it ever since. 30 years ago, a UU minister in the Northeast preached that when you are exhausted and struggling, you don't need to unplug. You need to plug in closer to the source. She said that, and it let the air back into my lungs, and I returned to practice and breath and the source. For some of us, unplugging isn't even available right now. So we need to keep exploring other options for what is possible when facing exhaustion. One option is to release the expectation of perfection. Even if we can't stop doing things, we can stop expecting ourselves to do them perfectly, completely, or even excellently. This will be the year that we let go of perfection. This can be the year of good enough. Another option is to rest a little bit or to celebrate a little bit in the space we do have. When the worship associates were talking about celebrating blessings, one of our worship associates says that she tells herself, you have 2 minutes to go look out the window. Go now, look. Beauty, rest, Zen in microdoses will nourish us. It will also give us the seed of the tree we want to grow in our lives. What would it look like for you to plug in closer to the source? Church is one way to plug in. You can come here for spiritual nourishment. You can come here for a reminder to return to our first principle, to our basics. You can come here for a connection to the source. If you're drained or exhausted or burnt out, come here, receive. Here's some good news. Let the music wash over you. Connect with a minister or a pastoral care associate for a listening presence. And if you are full and joyful and celebrating, because I know some of you are, please come and get that joy here. Celebrate with us. Rejoice in the music and the good news. Connect with people who want to celebrate with you. You are time banking joy for the collective, filling up the well of celebration, and we all need that. Church is also a place skilled in healing. What we create together in church, it heals trauma. It tends to grief. It processes the stress of burnout. We practice moving together in safe ways through ritual and song. We deliberately cultivate human connection. We practice breathing. We create together. We laugh and cry. And I know some of you try not to cry in church, but it is a safe place to do that. You don't have to have it all together in church, nor do you have to earn your value. Your value is inherent, and we know that, and we come together as a community to practice living that truth through discerning what really matters, through being true to it, through celebrating joy, and through healing grief. So come, bring your burnt out heart to this congregation, and we will hold it tenderly until you come back into a place of fullness and celebration. And come, bring your full celebrating heart here, and we will witness you and delight in your joy. Bring your talents and your resources and your sorrows and your joys here to the communal well, where we will drink of living water together until we are whole. We will plug in closer to the source, closer to love, and renew ourselves. This is what your pledge makes possible for you and for everyone else who needs to come to that well and drink. So please renew your pledge this Sunday, or turn it in online sometime this week. Increase it if you can, so we can help people plug in. You can find your last year pledge amount and this year's ask in your pledge drive materials, or if you can't find those, you can go ahead and ask Lynn Jacoby, our membership development coordinator, who will be happy to look it up for you. Ida Nixon, who married her beloved Cecil in 1944, had 2 children with him, one of whom they named Catherine after those 2 joyful days they banked on their honeymoon in their hotel. They were happily married for more than 30 years. That long happiness was planted as a small seed in those 2 days of joy in 1944. When Ida died in 2008, she asked that the poem, The Gate of the Year, by Minnie Louise Haskins, which she first heard in 1939, be read at her funeral. This is that poem, The Gate of the Year. I said to the man who stood at the gate of the year, give me a light that I may tread safely into the unknown. And he replied, go out into the darkness and put your hand into the hand of love. That shall be to you better than light and safer than a known way. We may not know the future, dear ones, and we may experience darkness in the present, but we do know each other and this community which is grounded in love. So come, put your hand in mine, and we will venture out into the unknown together. May it be so, and amen. It has been a blessing to be together. May you go out from here nourished and renewed, and use that to choose to bless the world. Until we meet again, may you be held, may you be healed, may you be whole. Blessed be, and amen.
We are going Heaven knows where we are going. We know within, and we will get there. Heaven knows how we will get there, but we know we will. Whoa, yeah, yeah. Whoa, yeah, yeah. Whoa, yeah, yeah. Whoa, yeah, yeah. Whoa, yeah, yeah.